I remember that morning vividly, the one that changed the entire course of my life. The conference room on the 18th floor of NeuralAxis, a glass tower overlooking downtown Austin, Texas, felt as cold as if someone had just opened a freezer door. I had been with the company for 11 years, back when it was just four of us huddled around an IKEA table, writing the first lines of code for our machine learning prototype. Back then, we dreamed of transforming healthcare through AI, and somehow, I did. The system everyone in the company bragged about, the one investors valued at $80 million, was mostly built by me. They called it the Metascan Neural Engine. I called it the child I'd raised on sleepless nights, endless debugging, and miles of log files scrolling across my screen. That morning, I sat across from Declan Hayes, the new operations VP brought in from New York. He was young, tall, his hair slicked back, smelling like a cologne commercial that screamed, "I am the future of this company," and me, the one who had survived every crisis, was now the legacy. "About the raise," I began, keeping my tone steady. "The number on the review sheet, $100 a year, is that a typo?" Declan looked up from his iPad, his smile thin as a blade. "No, Maya," he said slowly, each word dipped in condescension. "That's the correct number. The company is tightening its budget, but I believe it reflects recognition for your contributions." I laughed, though even I couldn't tell if it was out of sarcasm or disbelief. $100. A year. I'm not sure whether to say thank you or frame it in the company's comedy archives. Silence. Rick, the CTO, looked away. Helen from HR pretended to take notes. Declan tapped his pen on the table, his eyes turning cold. "If you're not satisfied," he said, "the door's right there." I stared at him for a few seconds, 1,000 replies swirling through my mind, some sharp, some bitter. But in the end, I just smiled. "All right," I said quietly. "Thank you for the clarity." I stood up. The furniture, the lights, those fake faces, all of it blurred together. 11 years of loyalty, ending with an amount smaller than a cheap dinner bill. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't need to. When a system collapses, it doesn't roar, it fractures in silence. I'd learned that from years of running Metascan. As I walked out, my heels clicked against the hardwood floor, each step like a countdown. I passed the wall where my framed Innovation of the Year certificate hung, my signature still visible at the corner. Nobody looked up. They already knew. News travels faster than any internal memo. My office was small but orderly. On the desk sat a cold cup of coffee, a few network schematics, and a labeled chip, Root Access Backup V2. I stared at it for a long moment. No, I thought, I won't need it. I opened my laptop and typed a short message to the operations team. "I've prepared the handover materials. Please refer to the folder Maya Transition on the system. Everything is clearly marked. Maya." Of course, clearly in my language meant something else. The diagrams were concise enough for someone competent to follow, but no one except me understood the full architecture. Not because I wanted to hide it. I'd proposed a secure access control framework 3 times in the last 2 years, each time rejected. Unnecessary, they said. Too time-consuming. I cleared the cache, removed my credentials, turned in my badge, and walked out for the last time. When the door shut behind me, I heard the click, not of a lock, but of trust sealing itself away. That afternoon, I sat in a cafe on South Congress, watching the traffic flow by. My anger didn't flare. It seeped slowly, like a current leaking through a wire. Electricity makes no sound, but it can burn a city to the ground. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about systems. Any structure without a failsafe collapses when one link is gone. NeuralAxis had just severed that link. I took a sip of coffee, opened my personal laptop, and watched lines of code run across the screen. A final pop-up appeared from the company's internal system. "Goodbye, Maya. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." I smiled. They had no idea that I was the future they had just thrown away. I went back to the office the next morning, not to plead or explain, but to clean up. My office was in the corner of the 15th floor, overlooking Lady Bird Lake. The morning sunlight reflected off the glass, casting my shadow on the wall, a reminder of the engineer who had given 11 years to this place and was now just the former one. The air felt different. The faces that once greeted me with easy smiles now looked uneasy. A few engineers avoided my eyes, others opened their mouths as if to say something, then stopped halfway. I just smiled back. I didn't blame them. In this world, loyalty lasts only as long as payroll clears on time. I opened the company laptop and checked everything one last time. The servers were still running, thousands of processes rotating without a glitch. I'd left the system in perfect harmony, like a song with no wrong notes. But I knew they didn't understand a single note of it. I pulled up the security architecture I had designed in my 7th year at NeuralAxis. 3 layers, 11 main nodes, 26 sub-branches, all encrypted through a physical verification chain linked to my personal device, a small token on my keychain. In my proposal back then, I had written, "If we don't create a contingency plan, the entire system will depend on one person. That's dangerous." Declan's reply had been just one line: "Danger is the engineer's problem, efficiency is mine." And they chose efficiency. I spent the morning deleting temporary copies and cleaning personal data. But there were things I intentionally left behind, guides detailed enough to make them believe everything was ready, though in truth, half the map was missing. Not because I wanted to sabotage them, but because that was reality. No one except me had ever accessed the system's core layer. No one understood the neural gate, the algorithm that synchronized medical data in real time. They just knew how to press deploy and pray it worked. Helen from HR came in, wearing a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi, Maya. I just need your signature on a few forms. Thank you for all your contributions." I signed 3 pages without reading. She went on, "We'll be collecting your badge. Your email access will end by the end of the day. The DevOps team will take over the technical side, so you don't have to worry." I almost laughed. The DevOps team would take over. These were the same people who, just a month ago, had asked me, "Why doesn't your system have a graphical interface?" I nodded, saying nothing. After she left, I sent one final email, this time to the entire operations group. "I've cleaned up the environment and left full documentation. Please review all security and two-factor authentication processes before the next update. Thank you for everything. Maya." At the bottom, I attached a file named transitionnotes.pgf. It was only 2 pages long. The first contained basic instructions. The second held just one italic line: "Every system needs a backup. Don't ignore the obvious." That afternoon, I packed up my things. A photo from 2016, me and the original engineering team standing in front of a whiteboard filled with formulas. A ceramic mug that read, "I make systems breathe." I put everything in the box except a small black USB labeled Hive Core. I took it out and turned it over in my hand. Inside was the system's blueprint, something no one could fully rebuild for months if lost. I didn't keep it for leverage. I kept it because it was mine, the part of my life they couldn't buy with a paycheck or a bonus. As I stepped out, Declan came out of the conference room, phone to his ear. He glanced at me, smirking. "Good luck, Maya." "You'll need it more than I will," I said calmly. He frowned, maybe confused. Or maybe he understood and was just too arrogant to care. That night, in my small apartment in South Austin, I opened my personal laptop. I logged into NeuralAxis's public monitoring dashboard, not to interfere, just to watch. Everything was green. The nodes were stable. Logs ran smoothly. Perfect. I watched streams of medical data flow, hundreds of patients diagnosed through the tool I'd built. I felt proud, but also sad, because I knew the people laughing in those conference rooms had no idea that every line of code was also a warning. On one of the dashboards, a faint message blinked. "Token not changed for 30 days. No one noticed. They never do. 2 days later, I received an automated HR email. "Your company account has been deactivated. NeuralAxis thanks you for your contributions. We wish you success in your next journey. I smiled softly. The thing they called deactivation applied only to the user account. The system itself was still running on the original credentials, mine. It wasn't their fault. It was the cost of complacency, a virus more dangerous than any malware, and me, the living firewall of the company, had been deleted from the system. But the funny part was, they had no idea I still held the key. As I shut the laptop, the sunset fell across the keyboard. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Not because I wanted revenge, I was just listening to the system breathing, the sound that only I could ever understand. Then I smiled. Sleep well, NeuralAxis, I whispered. Let's see if you survive the next update. 3 days after I left NeuralAxis, my personal inbox started filling with automatic error alerts from the system I used to manage. Nothing serious, just small warnings. Subnode response time decreased by 8%. Minor desynchronization in backup data region. Those weren't critical. I'd seen them hundreds of times, and a few quick commands would have fixed everything. But I knew no one there would understand what those messages meant. I didn't plan to interfere. I had left, and as an ethical engineer, I respected boundaries. But Declan didn't. I heard it from Derek, an old friend from the dev team. He called me on a Thursday evening, his voice lowered like he was afraid someone might be listening. Maya, you have no idea what they're doing. Declan brought in an outside consulting team from New York. They're modifying the core, saying they want to simplify the architecture. I let out a dry laugh. Simplify? That system will blow up if you touch it wrong. It was optimized with 11 years of experience, not a PowerPoint deck from consultants. Derek sighed. I know, but he's the boss now. He's trying to prove he doesn't need you. That line made me sit still for a while, not out of anger, but because I understood. People like Declan don't just remove others. They erase evidence that anyone ever did better than them. The next day, NeuralAxis's internal bulletin published an announcement. The company launches the Recode initiative, restructuring the infrastructure to boost performance by 20%. The photo showed Declan standing in front of a big screen, hand raised, smile gleaming like a toothpaste ad. The headline beneath read, "The future of NeuralAxis begins with change." I couldn't help laughing. They called dismantling what they didn't understand change. Through Derek, I learned Declan was restructuring the patient data management module, the system's most critical part. He told the consultants to remove unnecessary code layers, not realizing those were the self-repair security modules I'd added after the 2019 cyber attack. One night, Derek texted me. He just deleted a file called neuralbridge.conf. Now the backup system can't sync. Do you still have a copy? I stared at the screen, my fingers brushing the Hive Core USB. I had everything, but I didn't reply. Because I knew, the more I intervened, the deeper I'd be pulled back in. I had been the one saving them from crashes, outages, and near disasters that customers never even knew about. Now they'd have to learn on their own. I only hoped they learned before it was too late. But Declan didn't stop at the code. He held a company-wide meeting and announced that Maya left behind an outdated, overcomplicated system, and that Recode will free NeuralAxis from its past. Derek told me afterward that Declan winked at the exec team and joked, half serious. We can't let one person understand everything. That kind of control is more dangerous than a security flaw. That line froze me when I heard it. Not wrong, but ironic. He was proving the exact opposite. I kept watching from afar. A week later, the public NeuralAxis dashboard started showing irregularities. AI processing speed dropped by 15%. Several intermediate nodes are disconnected. 403 unauthorized errors tripled. I knew exactly what was happening. They were tampering with the access control layers and accidentally locking themselves out of the data streams. When a system's protection is automated, it doesn't distinguish between a hacker and an idiot. I could picture Declan in the boardroom, frowning, barking into his phone, ordering the engineers to check again. Probably saying things like, "Don't panic, every system has bugs. We just need to reset. Blame AWS." Everyone loves that excuse. And when the reset failed, he'd tell them to temporarily bypass authentication to keep services running. I sighed. Bypassing authentication is just opening the door to chaos. I remembered the day I designed that system, built for absolute safety, not convenience for some new executive. Every module had self verification and auto recovery. It only ran when all physical credentials matched. What Declan was doing, stripping or simplifying those layers, was like pulling the pin from a grenade without realizing it was still in his hand. One late night, Derek messaged again. He's demanding root access. But your token's still the default. No one can replace it because the system requires biometric verification. I paused for a moment, then replied, That's not a bug. That's the design. Derek sent back a bitter smile emoji. I could picture them scrambling under fluorescent lights, engineers running around searching for documentation. But there's no manual for arrogance. The next day, NeuralAxis's LinkedIn page posted a new update from Declan. Innovation requires courage. Sometimes you have to dismantle the old to build something better. The post had over 200 likes, mostly from people who didn't know a single thing about code. I smiled, closed the page. In the world of tech, people like him live on short-term impressions. People like me build long-term systems. And the problem with long-term systems is, when they collapse, they don't send a warning first. I stepped out onto the balcony, looking over Austin's night lights. I no longer belonged to NeuralAxis, but a part of me still lived in every line of that code, and I knew. All it would take was one more mistake, and that system would protect itself in a way no one expected. Collapse never arrives with noise. It starts with faint signals, small enough to ignore until it's too late. About a week after I left NeuralAxis, the first cracks appeared. At first, it was just a hospital in El Paso, reporting that the diagnostic engine was responding a few seconds slower. Nothing major. Then a small clinic in San Diego noticed patient records showing slightly different results on separate terminals. I saw it mentioned on an online forum where engineers traded troubleshooting notes. Someone had posted a short message. Anyone else getting mismatched timestamps when pulling lab results from different sites lately? My chest tightened the moment I read it. I knew what was happening. Those inconsistencies weren't from overload. They were the result of someone tampering with the foundation without understanding how the structure held together. Derek, my old teammate, called me on a Wednesday night. His voice sounded tired. Maya, they've started deleting some of your old code. Said they're trying to clean things up. I didn't answer. There are lines you marked as critical, but no one knows what they do. They said if we don't understand it, it's probably unnecessary. I laughed, not out of humor, but recognition. I'd heard that line too many times. That same arrogance was why I'd written entire proposals for redundancy plans, access delegation, and incident response. None of them were ever approved. By the ninth day, it was no longer subtle. A hospital in Missouri reported that patient records didn't match between departments. In one case, a doctor saw pneumonia while the nurse's screen showed a blank file. That wasn't just a technical issue anymore. It was endangering lives. Inside NeuralAxis, the engineering team panicked. They sent frantic emails, scheduled emergency calls, stayed up all night, but no one had an answer. I could picture it all. Young engineers hunched over flickering screens, sweat forming along their foreheads, fingers trembling over keyboards. Meanwhile, Declan, the man who promised a great restructuring, was telling the board, these disruptions are just temporary side effects of an outdated, overly complex system. Nothing to worry about, we're improving. He didn't realize that every line of code deleted without understanding was another thread pulled from a stretched web. There was a new engineer named Alex. He was the first to notice a small piece of code I had written in the system's earliest days. It wasn't flashy, but it served as the final checkpoint, preventing conflicts when multiple users accessed the same dataset simultaneously. Alex didn't know its purpose. He posted on Slack, "Anyone know what this part does?" No one replied clearly. A consultant said, "If nobody knows, just remove it. What's the worst that could happen?" And they did. That night, for the first time in nearly 2 years, a doctor in Florida reported that the diagnostic engine returned a blank result. No data, no error, no warning, just nothing. Derek called me, panicked. You don't get it, Maya. The system isn't crashing. It's quiet, like it's refusing to run. I closed my eyes. That was when I knew. The system had started to withdraw. The next day, the public monitoring dashboard slowed noticeably. A small red chart blinked, showing that the backup nodes were now 3 times slower than normal. I had designed the network so that if one part failed, the others would automatically compensate. But when even the backups began to lag, it meant they had destroyed the escape route. Around midnight, Derek texted again. They're about to do something reckless. Declan just proposed disabling one of the authentication layers to keep the system from freezing. You know what that means. I knew. When you start cutting the last safety checks just to make a system look like it's running, you've already entered the kill zone. I didn't reply. I just stared at the stream of data on my screen, the numbers slowing, breaking apart. They looked like the heartbeat of a comatose patient. The monitor still silent, but anyone who understands knows the crisis has already begun. And this time, there was no one left to save it. Monday morning. Austin was gray, the kind of dull sky where mist and drizzle blur together into a thin film across the window. I made a cup of black coffee and opened my personal laptop out of habit, as if it were just another workday at NeuralAxis. But today, something was different. I didn't need the alert dashboard to tell me the system was collapsing. I could see it in Derek's uneasy eyes through the phone screen, hear it in the way he whispered, "It's bad, Maya. The system's rejecting user access." The call came in at 7:12 in the morning. Seattle's logistics team can't log in, Derek said. Their dashboard's completely blank. They sent a screen recording. It's just a spinning circle that never ends. I froze for a second, the coffee halfway to my lips. We've tried everything, he went on, his voice rising with each word. We reset the backup servers, rebooted the recognition module, even disabled a few security layers to ease the load, but nothing works. It's like the entire platform is rejecting us. I closed my eyes and set the cup down. I knew this moment would come. I wasn't a prophet, just someone who had warned them that if they touched what they didn't understand, the system would react. And when it did, it wouldn't scream or sound alarms. It would go silent and lock the door. By 9 o'clock, emergency calls started flooding the support. A clinic in Denver reported losing access to over 400 patient records. A major hospital in Ohio said its analytics dashboard, used to monitor ICU vitals, had gone completely dark. Everything still looked operational. The servers were running. No error messages appeared, but every entry point had been sealed, as if the system had shut off the lights and vanished from the grid. I sat in silence. On my monitor, the public metrics graph flattened into a strange calm. No movement, no rhythm, no breath. A system that crashes is easier to fix than one that refuses to run without explanation. Because at that point, you don't know if you're dealing with a malfunction or a decision. And I knew this system never made the wrong one. Derek called again. His tone had changed. No longer fear, just exhaustion. They can't get in, he said. We've been locked out of our own platform. Every root credential, every backup code, denied. It won't recognize any token except the original device. I didn't have to ask. I knew what that device was. The USB is sitting on my desk. Meanwhile, Declan held an emergency meeting with the DevOps team. According to Derek, he didn't shout or panic. He simply stood before the projected status board, face calm, as if this was all part of the plan. We're going through an internal audit, Declan said. It might be a scheduling error or a token sync issue. No one is to panic. He used the phrase internal audit as if hundreds of doctors and nurses weren't locked out of life-saving data, but just stuck in some routine puzzle. To stabilize the situation, he ordered the engineers to lower the priority of all automated alerts, stop sending panic emails, and specifically shut down the Slack thread #SOSTemp. Because, as he said, worry only makes things worse. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something rise in my chest, something I couldn't name. Not triumph, not satisfaction, a deep sadness. Because I knew, if they had read the notes I left, If they had taken the time to understand how the system breathed, if they had listened to me just once, this wouldn't be happening. By noon, an internal email leaked online, this time from a company legal advisor. If the platform is not restored within 6 hours, we will officially breach our SLA agreements with at least 3 major healthcare partners. Preliminary estimated damages, 6.8 million USD. And that was just the surface. Outside, clients began posting publicly. A hospital in California wrote on LinkedIn, "We expect stability from our tech partners the way we expect it from a heartbeat. No one wants their patients suspended in the silence of a frozen system." By evening, I received one last message from Derek that day. Short. One line. "Maya, the backup system just denied the final admin credential. We've officially lost control." I stared at the message, then out the window. The sky was still overcast, as if even the heavens were holding their breath with the system. They had bet that I was just another name on the payroll. They had thought I was a quiet, replaceable engineer. They had put their faith in simplification, in people who spoke better than they built, in presentations instead of understanding. And now, the system I created was rejecting them. Not because I wrote sabotage code, not because I planted traps, but because I built it the way I believed any system should work. If neglected, it stops serving. Not by human command, but by principle. By nightfall, I shut my laptop. I didn't want to see more because I knew the worst was still coming. Tomorrow, the system would enter full lockdown, and when that happened, no one could call it a technical glitch. It would be a catastrophe. The next morning, I woke with the strange sense that I'd crossed an invisible line between the world of order and the chaos that offered no way back. NeuralAxis was no longer a company experiencing technical difficulties. It had become the epicenter of a technological earthquake, one that disrupted millions of medical data streams, impacted hundreds of thousands of patients, and crushed a reputation that had taken more than a decade to build, all in a matter of days. And the worst part was, no one else was to blame but themselves. Arrogance, complacency, the belief that they were too important to make mistakes. That was what destroyed them. Derek called at 6:30 in the morning. There was no soft, "Did I wake you?" this time. His voice was hoarse, weary, and rushed, like someone holding a door shut against a storm. "Maya, you need to hear this. The executive meeting concluded at 3 a.m., and I think it turned into a trial." I sat up, turned on my laptop without bothering with the lights. The screen's pale glow washed over my face, cold and sterile, like the opening cue of a play no one wanted to perform. Derek's voice was fragmented, tense, like he was afraid to leave anything out. After the system locked every admin account, Declan still refused to stop. He gathered the tech team and ordered a full reboot from the backup servers. What he didn't know, or deliberately ignored, was that the backup servers were secured under the same authentication layers as the main system. All of those layers were tied to me. After 3 failed reboot attempts, the room went completely silent. A young engineer whispered, voice trembling, "What if the system isn't broken? What if it's just rejecting us?" The words dropped like a blade, thin, sharp, and cold. No one answered. In that suffocating silence, Heather, the partner accounts manager, hurried to access the internal archive. She searched through years of technical documentation, desperate for something that could explain what was happening. Then she found it. Buried in an old, forgotten folder was a document titled Risk Assessment, Single Point of Failure. Author, Maya Trent. It was a report I had written about 6 months before I left. In it, I warned clearly, if access control isn't distributed, if the authentication layers aren't gradually transferred, the entire platform would become dependent on a single individual. And if that person left without a formal handover, the system would be nearly impossible to recover. Heather read the paragraph aloud in the meeting room. No one spoke. The air grew so thick they could hear the sound of a pen dropping. After a few moments, the CTO, the same one who'd dismissed my proposal as a waste of time and resources, finally spoke, his voice small and uncertain. I remember that document. I thought she was exaggerating to get more staff. Then Declan spoke. The man who had once declared that everything's under control was now red faced, his voice cracking. That can't be. She couldn't have been the only one. We have a tech team, we have DevOps, we have consultants. Margaret, the CFO, cut him off, her tone cold as steel. Yes, we have teams, but they're teams led by people who never read the handover notes. She looked straight at Declan, her words slow and deliberate. You fired the one person who actually understood how this system works and replaced her with PowerPoint slides. Derek said that after that line, the entire room shifted. No one talked about bugs anymore. No one asked how to fix it. They started asking who was responsible, who signed the termination, who ignored the warnings, who guaranteed that everything would be fine. Email chains were opened, signatures highlighted, and every thread, every trace, led straight back to Declan. Margaret ended the meeting with one sentence that hung in the air like smoke. We weren't hacked. We weren't attacked. We weren't sabotaged. We were abandoned. A short sentence, but enough to crush every breath in the room. I sat there listening to Derek recount all of it, feeling nothing, not vindication, not anger, just emptiness. Because I knew it didn't have to come to this. I had warned them, I had spoken. They just never listened. A system doesn't need to be attacked to collapse. It only needs to be neglected. When Derek finished, I stayed quiet for a long time. Images came flooding back. Me years ago, sitting alone in a small office, coding past midnight, drinking cold coffee, writing risk prevention plans in silence, filing them away into folders no one ever opened. I wasn't proud. I wasn't bitter, just relieved. Because finally, they had seen what I'd been saying for years. Real value doesn't come from the loudest voice, but from the one willing to speak when no one else wants to listen. Before we hung up, Derek lowered his voice, almost whispering. Margaret wants to reach out to you. They might ask for your help. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Let them think on it, Derek. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just waiting for them to understand the obvious. That afternoon, I sat in my usual cafe, the same window seat overlooking South Congress, where the last light of day spilled across the table in thin golden streaks. I had just finished reading the headline from a major tech site covering the biggest system failure in NeuralAxis history. In bold letters, it read, NeuralAxis $80 million medical AI system crashes nationwide. Hundreds of hospitals lose patient data access. Below it were hundreds of comments, some mocking, others furious. But one stood out, holding me still for a long moment. Rumor has it the woman who built that system got fired for asking for a $100 raise. I let out a quiet laugh, half bitter, half amused. Rumors travel faster than any official statement, and for the first time, my silence began to carry weight. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. Not Derek this time. A number I didn't recognize, but the Austin area code told me enough. I knew who it was. I let it ring 5 times before picking up. Maya, a calm, controlled voice said. This is Margaret Delaney. We need to talk. I didn't answer right away. Through the line, I could hear her breathing. Steady, but heavy, laced with fatigue, restraint, and something faintly resembling remorse. The company's in crisis, she said finally. We need your help to restore the system. Whatever terms you name, we'll consider them. I leaned back, eyes on the people outside, laughing and walking under the warm light of late afternoon. Life moving on, untouched by the implosion of NeuralAxis. I thought for a few seconds, then spoke evenly. There's nothing for me to restore. Everything's still there. You just don't have access. The system is only doing what it was designed to do. Protect itself. Margaret didn't respond. I heard the faint rustle of papers, notes for the call, probably. What will it take for you to help us? Her voice was softer now, no longer the cold CFO I once knew. I glanced at the clock. The minute hand crawled forward. This isn't about what I want, I said quietly. It's about value. The same value you traded for a PowerPoint on productivity. 3 hours later, an email arrived from NeuralAxis. The subject line read, Urgent Collaboration Request, NeuralAxis System Recovery Project. The message was carefully worded, independent consulting contract. Rate, $2,000 per hour, with the first 10 hours prepaid. Full technical authority during recovery operations. And one clause, written at my insistence, the company will issue a public apology acknowledging that the termination of Maya Trent was a mistake. I reread every line, not for typos, but for tone. The same people who once called me legacy baggage now use words like expert, partner, and lead consultant. A small change, but heavier than any paycheck. The next morning, I returned to the NeuralAxis building for the first time in almost a month. The rain had just stopped, and puddles on the street mirrored blurred reflections of people rushing by. I wore a white blouse, black slacks, and hair neatly tied. No badge, no logo. Just a kind of freedom I'd never felt while working there. The security guard at the gate didn't recognize me. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" he asked. I handed him a temporary pass marked consultant. He checked, nodded, and opened the gate. Inside, chaos filled the lobby. Dozens of employees darted around, tension thick in the air. On the big screen in the center, red letters flashed. System inaccessible. Data verification failed. On the 18th floor, the conference room door was wide open. I heard Declan's voice before I saw him. "We can't let her control everything. This is extortion," he shouted. The door swung open. Every head turned. Silence. I stepped in and set my bag on the table. Declan froze. His face drained of color, eyes unfocused, like he'd just seen a ghost. Margaret rose to her feet and extended a hand. "Thank you for coming, Maya." I didn't shake it, just nodded. "Let's begin. The longer we wait, the deeper the lockout gets." No one said a word. I opened my laptop and plugged in the device. A single line appeared on the main display. Access recognized. Maya T. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, data began to move again. Graphs revived. Systems flickered to life. Soft light from the monitors spread across the room like the first sunrise after a long night. Within minutes, hospitals started reconnecting. Notifications pinged nonstop. Disbelief turned into applause. I typed the final sequence of commands and said quietly, "One last step. I'll complete the restoration once you sign the final clause." Margaret nodded, understanding. Then she turned to Declan. "You're done here. Leave." His mouth fell open. "What? No," Margaret cut him off. "You're the one who cost us nearly $20 million in 48 hours. Walk out now before I have security do it." He stood frozen for a few seconds, then stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I watched him go, not angry, not triumphant, just calm. The kind of calm I had been waiting 11 years to feel. By the time I left the room, the system was 92% restored. Hospitals were back online. Patients regained access. NeuralAxis staff cheered. But I didn't stay to listen. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, each step heavier and lighter at once. Before leaving, I paused in the lobby before the polished plaque that still read Innovation of the Year, my name etched in the corner. I brushed my fingers over the signature and whispered, just for myself, "This time, I didn't save them. I saved my work." That evening, an email arrived. NeuralAxis has officially signed a consulting agreement with Maya Trent. The company acknowledges serious failures in personnel management and individual value assessment. A public apology will be released within 24 hours. I read it once, then closed my screen. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, like the quiet end of an era. I hadn't come back for revenge. I came back to prove one simple truth. Real worth never disappears. It just waits to be recognized. The next morning, I returned to NeuralAxis. This time, no one looked at me like a stranger. They stepped aside as I walked down the hallway. Some nodded slightly. Others kept their eyes on their phones, pretending to be busy. It wasn't pride I felt, or satisfaction. It was a quiet stillness, the kind that follows a fire when only embers remain. The server room was in the basement, the same one only I used to frequent. The security door was still intact. The eye scanner beeped softly when I looked into it. The green light came on. The door opened. Cold air hit my face. Rows of machines stood in perfect formation, silent sentinels with faint blinking lights, like the heartbeat of something slowly coming back to life. I set my bag on the table, connected my device, and sat down in my old chair. It creaked just the same. That sound softened me a little. Only this time, I no longer belonged here. I opened the recovery interface and entered the access string. The system recognized my credentials instantly. The main screen flared to life, maps of hospitals, clinics, and medical centers lighting up one by one with the same status: restoring. The DevOps engineers stood behind me, watching. No one spoke. They looked on like students witnessing someone translate an ancient language they'd never known existed. A young woman hesitated, then asked, "Did you really build the whole thing yourself?" I didn't turn around. I smiled faintly. I just helped it learn to stand. The rest, it did on its own. The system responded. Streams of data began to move again, glowing lines weaving across the map. Minutes later, the first hospital reports arrived. Connection restored. Patient records accessible. AI diagnostics stable. I typed a few final commands and launched a full integrity check. Each alert flickered, then disappeared, like small wounds quietly closing. Margaret entered the room and stood behind me. Her voice was lower than usual, softer. "No one thought you could do this so fast." I kept my eyes on the screen. "It's not fast, it's because I never really left." When everything stabilized, I opened a document, a plan I'd written long ago but never had the chance to submit. File name: Decentralization and Post-Crisis Recovery Framework. I sent it to Margaret's inbox, then turned in my chair. "I won't let this system depend on a single person again," I said. "When I walk away this time, it'll stand on its own, even without me." Margaret nodded. "Understood. You'll have full authority to implement it." She paused, then met my eyes. "But I need to say this. On behalf of the company, I'm sorry." The words weren't dramatic, but they were sincere. I looked at her, seeing the exhaustion and genuine regret. "No need to apologize," I said calmly. "Just remember, a system can't survive if the people running it treat it like a tool. It's a living thing. It reflects how we treat each other." Margaret gave a small nod and left, the hum of the servers filling the silence behind her. It took nearly 4 hours to complete the full restoration. When the final message appeared, all systems operational, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. Not from fatigue, but from release. It felt like giving birth to something twice, and this time it was strong enough to stand on its own. A young engineer rushed in, face bright with disbelief. "Maya! The national network is back online. Hospitals are sending their thanks." I nodded. "Good. Now, back up everything, revoke my credentials, and distribute access to the 3 leads listed in the document I sent. No one should ever hold the only key again." He nodded quickly, eyes wide, finally understanding the weight of what that meant. By 2 in the afternoon, I packed my things. The room was bright now, machines steady, the system breathing again. People from the team stood up. Some came forward to shake my hand, others just watched quietly. I knew their gratitude wasn't only for saving the system. It was for the lesson that their company had paid for with its reputation. Before leaving, I placed a small drive on Margaret's desk. Inside was everything: the new documentation, operational protocols, updated security diagrams, and one short note: "No system truly collapses if the people within it know how to listen. MT." By late afternoon, I stepped out of the NeuralAxis building. Sunlight bounced off the glass panels, blinding enough to make me squint. Behind me, an era had closed. Ahead, the city went on as if nothing had happened. Cars, horns, the smell of coffee, the rhythm of ordinary life, unaware that a near disaster had just passed. I walked slowly, breathing in the warm air, lighter than I had felt in years. I was no longer the woman fired for asking a $100 raise. I was the one who taught an entire company, and maybe the world, that respect can't be bought with salary or titles. It's built on understanding, responsibility, and knowing when to stay silent and when to speak. That night back home, I opened my inbox. Dozens of emails poured in from companies, from organizations, from people I'd never met who said my story inspired them. I opened just one. It was from Derek. No one here will say it out loud, but everyone's thinking the same thing. If Maya hadn't come back, we would have lost everything. Thank you, truly. I replied briefly. I didn't come back to save them. I came back to prove that real worth never disappears. Sometimes it just takes a collapse for people to finally see it. Then I closed the laptop, made a cup of tea, and watched the city lights flicker across the table. Tiny reflections like fragments of code I once wrote, once dismissed, now shining proof of what resilience looks like. I closed my eyes. No anger, no resentment, only peace. Because I knew the system, like me, had finally been restored. 2 weeks after leaving NeuralAxis, I sat in a quiet interview with a small tech magazine in Austin. They wanted to uncover the secret behind the $80 million collapse. But what they really wanted to understand was the person who brought the system back to life. I smiled when the young reporter asked, "Do you ever regret not warning them more forcefully before you left?" I set my coffee down, looking out the window where the leaves were turning gold. "I did warn them," I said slowly. "But people only hear what they want to believe. The rest, they call noise." She wrote that down, then asked, "So who really owns that system now? You, the company, or both?" I stayed silent for a while. I thought of the long nights, the lines of code, the security layers, the access maps, and the people inside NeuralAxis. People who once saw the system as a tool until it proved that they were the most fragile variables in it. "No one owns a system forever," I finally said. "The only person who can truly hold it is the one who understands that everything must be shared. Knowledge, authority, responsibility, not for safety, but for humanity." The reporter nodded, smiling, and ended the session with a softer question. "What's next for you?" I laughed. "Maybe teaching. I once built a system that learned on its own. Now I want to teach people not to forget how to relearn themselves." That evening, I walked through downtown Austin, the streets alive with neon and chatter. At one corner, a group of college students was talking about NeuralAxis, saying my name, laughing, tossing around phrases like "she's a legend" and "DevOps queen." I didn't stop. I just walked past, listening as the wind carried their voices away, feeling strangely light. When I got home, my inbox was full. Dozens of collaboration offers from startups and major firms alike, all saying the same thing. "We need someone who understands systems like you do." I read a few, then closed the laptop. I didn't need a job. I needed meaning. A week later, an email came from Derek. "Maya, you're going to laugh. Declan just left the company. Word is he's writing a book about organizational crisis in the digital age. Anyway, the system's been running smoothly. Everyone's following the decentralization plan you left. Margaret wants to send you a small gift. She says it's a token of gratitude. P.S. The young engineer you met in the server room got promoted to head of security. She said, I just want to do what Maya said, teach others." I laughed out loud, not bitterly, but warmly, because in the end, what I left behind wasn't code, it was awareness. That night, I opened my laptop and checked the public monitoring dashboard, a habit I hadn't quite shaken. Green bars, steady flow, flawless performance. The system ran as if no storm had ever passed. Only now, I no longer have access. I had removed every trace of my credentials, wiped all special privileges. It didn't feel like a loss. It felt like watching something you raised finally stand on its own. I closed the laptop and poured a glass of wine. Outside, the first winter wind brushed past. I sat in the quiet, thinking of everything, from that cold meeting room where Declan said, "If you're not happy, there's the door," to Margaret's trembling voice saying, "We need you back." Just weeks apart, yet they felt like two different lifetimes. I realized every system, whether technological or human, needs one collapse to truly understand stability. Not stability through perfection, but through knowing when to pause, to listen, and to share power. The next day, the magazine published the article. Headline: The Woman Fired Over $100 and the Lesson of True Worth in the Age of AI. The comments section exploded with shares. One reader wrote, "She didn't seek revenge. She reminded us that dignity and intellect are never cheap." Another replied, "Sometimes the most human thing you can do for a system is let it crash, so it learns to rise the right way." I read a few, then shut the screen. I didn't need to read more. Later that night, my phone lit up with a new message. It was from Margaret. "Maya, thank you." I reread the note you left on the drive. There was a line I didn't understand before, but I think I do now. The one who truly keeps a system alive isn't the person with the password, but the one who believes it's worth saving. Thank you for believing, even when we didn't believe you. I read it without replying, just smiled. Outside, the city was quiet. I stepped onto the balcony and breathed in the night air. In my mind, I could still hear the faint hum of servers, the tap of keys, the whisper of data moving across a million channels. Not loud, just a gentle rhythm of something I once created. The system belonged to them now. But its worth and mine still lived on, in the way they looked inward, in every decision they'd make from here on. I raised my glass softly, as if to toast my own past. "Thank you for firing me," I whispered. "Without that day, this one would never exist." A small smile crossed my lips, not of victory, but of peace. Because at last, I had restored the one thing that mattered most, my faith in myself.